You must have heard that chess is 10% strategy and 90% tactics. While strategy is your long term plan in a game, tactics are a set of moves to gain a quick win, like a material or a positional advantage. In this video, I will show you all the major tactics with examples and also a really interesting chess puzzle to test your understanding of these tactics. So stay tuned till the end and keep watching Chess Talk. I will be showing you 24 tactics and in each case it will be white to move. Let's start with one of the most common tactics, and that is the fork. A fork happens when a single piece makes two or more direct attacks at the same time. In most cases, two pieces are threatened, therefore a fork is also sometimes called a double attack. Let's look at this game. White plays rook to c7, placing a double attack on the knight and bishop. Since black can only save one of them, white will win a piece, and that's the main idea behind a fork. Remember, you can fork with all your pieces including a pawn, so always be on the lookout for such positions. This is an example of a fork with the knight, this is a fork with the bishop, here's a fork with the queen, this is how you can fork with your king, and finally this is a fork with the pawn. Moving on, let's discuss pins. A pin occurs when a piece is held in place and can't move without giving up a more valuable piece behind it. In this game, white plays queen to h8, pinning this bishop. Black cannot move his bishop since the king is behind it, and therefore white will win this bishop. There are two types of pins, an absolute pin and a relative pin. When a piece is pinned to the king, it is called an absolute pin. The pinned piece just cannot move in this case. It would be illegal if he tries to move his knight here, therefore it's an absolute pin. On the other hand, a relative pin is when a piece is pinned to another piece of greater value and not the king. In this case, the knight is pinned to the queen. So even though black can legally move his knight, but it would be a terrible move because he would then lose his queen. Hence it's a relative pin. Remember, you can pin only with three pieces, the queen, the rook and the bishop. The next tactic we are going to look at is a skewer. A skewer is an attack on two pieces that are lined up with one another. The first piece is the more valuable piece. When it moves out of the way, the less valuable piece behind it is captured. In this case, when the king moves, the queen is captured. In fact, you can think of a skewer as an opposite of the pin. In a pin, the less valuable piece is in the front, whereas in a skewer, the more valuable piece is in the front. Just like the pin, you can skewer only with three pieces, the queen, the rook and the bishop. Now let's look at discovered attacks. A discovered attack occurs when one piece moves and uncovers an attack by another piece. In this game, white moves his bishop, and by doing so we can say that he has launched a discovered attack on this knight. We can also call this a discovered double attack since he is also attacking this rook with his bishop. Since black cannot save both of them in one move, white will win material and gain a solid advantage. A very effective form of discovered attack is the discovered check. This occurs when the uncovered piece checks the opposing king. In this game, white moves his rook and uncovers a discovered check on the black king. Once the king moves, white can capture this knight and gain a match-winning advantage. Another powerful form of the discovered check is the discovered double check. A double check is more dangerous because with this, not only the hidden piece attacks the king, but also the piece that moves. Have a look at this game. White plays knight to f5 and it's a double check. Not only is the queen attacking the enemy king, but also this knight. Whenever it's a double check, the enemy king has to move. In this game, since there is no safe square for the king to go, it's a brilliant checkmate. Next on our list is a tactic called windmill. It's a rare tactic in which a repeated discovered check allows one piece to go on a rampage, capturing multiple enemy pieces. Let's take a look. In this game, white first sacrifices his queen and then captures on g7 with a check. He then begins a series of checks which are all forced and inescapable by black. This leads to a series of captures as you can see, and eventually white ends up with a huge material advantage. The next tactic we are going to look at is interference. In chess, interference occurs when the line between an attack piece and its defender is interrupted by interposing a piece. In this game, as you can see, both these rooks are defending each other. White plays the smart move knight c6 check. This knight is now interfering between these two rooks and making this rook vulnerable. Whatever move black plays, white will gain material and take the lead. or number 7 is overloading. As the name suggests, overloading is when one piece is assigned to protect multiple pieces, squares, or threads at the same time. When this happens, we refer to that piece as being overloaded or overworked. Let's understand from this example how we can distract an overloaded piece from one of its protecting tasks. If you analyze, this bishop is defending two threads, preventing this checkmate and protecting this pawn. Since this bishop is overloaded, white can take advantage by capturing this pawn. Black cannot take this bishop because of this checkmate, so eventually he will lose a lot of material. The next tactic you need to know is the deflection tactic. The idea here is to chase away or to deflect an enemy piece from an important square. In this game, for example, we can see that this king is defending this rook. If white can move this king away from this square, then he can take this rook. So can you find a move to achieve that? Yes, white can simply play bishop h7 check to deflect this king away from this important square. And after the king moves, white can capture the rook and gain a material advantage. Now let's look at decoy. It's a tactic where you set up a trap for your opponent. It's kind of related to deflection. In deflection, we force the opponent away from a particular square, whereas in decoy, we force him to move his piece to a particular square. Such a square where we want to get him to is generally called a poisoned square. So basically, we play a move that forces the enemy piece to that poisoned square. In this game, black is completely dominating. One more move and white will be gone. Can you think of any way for white to win this immediately? See, white can give checks, but black can escape this way. Had this black king been here, rook to c8 was checkmate. Thinking on these lines, we need to get this king to this poisoned f8 square. And how can we do that? Yes, it's queen f8 check. If king moves to h7, then queen g7 is a checkmate. And if king takes the queen, then rook to c8 is a checkmate. Okay, we are almost halfway through, and if you've reached this far and liked it, then please show your support and hit that thumbs up button right now. Okay, now let's look at a tactic called X-ray attack. It's an indirect attack on an enemy piece or an indirect defense through an enemy piece. To understand, let's look at this game. As you can see, the bishop on f3 is attacking the bishop on d5. At the same time, it's indirectly attacking the pawn on b7. By using the X-ray tactic, we can take this pawn on b7 with our knight, and then if the bishop captures our knight, we can recapture with our bishop, and eventually we are up by a pawn. Let's look at another example. Here white plays queen to e8 check. Even though there is no direct defender for this queen, this rook and queen still defend each other through this enemy rook. It's like an X-ray defense. Since it is a check and the black king cannot move, therefore black is forced to take the queen. And finally, after rook captures, it's a checkmate. Next, we have Zugzwang, which is a German word that means it is your turn to move and all your moves are bad. This is a situation where every move a player could make will significantly worsen his position and at times even cause him to lose the game. Let's take a look. In this game, white plays the waiting move rook to d8, placing black in Zugzwang. Black's only moves loses the game immediately. Since there is no option to skip a move in chess, black will have to move his king and then it's game over. Tactic number 12 is Zwischenzug. This is a German word meaning an intermediate move or an in-between move. It is a chess tactic in which a player inserts an unexpected move in between an otherwise forcing sequence of moves. Let's see how it works. In this game, white first takes this pawn with his knight. Black is forced to take this rook, and now comes the in-between move. Instead of recapturing the rook, the knight grabs another pawn with a check. And after the knight reaches a safe square, he finally takes back the rook, gaining a material advantage. The next tactic we need to know is undermining, which means removal of the defender. It basically involves attacking or capturing a critical defending piece to gain significant material advantage or even checkmate your opponent. In this game, white takes this knight with his rook. The main idea being to remove the knight on e8 from its protection of the g7 pawn. So after the rook takes, queen g7 would be a checkmate. Another tactic you can use is that of forcing a stalemate from an otherwise lost or unfavorable position. In this game, as you can see, white is clearly behind. A draw will be good for white. In order to achieve this, he starts off with this rook check. Black plays the only legal move, king to b3. Now the white king has no square to go. Therefore white plays the cunning move rook to c7, sacrificing the rook to take advantage of the king's stalemate position. Even if black moves his rook away, white can keep chasing him and again the game will end in a draw. Okay, now let's look at another way of achieving a draw from an otherwise losing position, and that is by way of perpetual checks or by the rule of threefold repetition. Draw by perpetual checks is a situation where one player can check the opponent's king forever but cannot checkmate it. When perpetual check happens, the players usually either agree to a draw, or if the same position is repeated 3 times, it results in a draw by the rule of threefold repetition. In this game, since white is down a significant amount of material already, he decides to sacrifice his rook. After king takes, he continues to check with his queen and the game ends in a draw. This is how you can use this rule to your advantage. Okay, now let's talk about under promotion as a tactic. Under promotion means promoting a pawn to a piece less than a queen, which means promoting a pawn to a knight, rook, or a bishop. There could be many reasons for under promoting. It could be to stop an opponent's threat, to deliver a deadly checkmate, to prevent a stalemate, or to achieve something even better than what a queen could offer. In this game, for example, white played this brilliant move combination, and after under promoting to a knight, he managed to come out on top. So whenever one of your pawns is approaching promotion, just think if there is any way to under promote and gain an advantage. Okay, now let's look at some tactical sacrifices. The most common sacrifice is a queen sacrifice. In this game, white's queen is being attacked. However, he ignores it to achieve something bigger. First he plays knight e8, exposing this bishop and at the same time giving a discovered check. Now when black takes this queen, then rook to f8 is a beautiful checkmate. There isn't a better feeling than winning a game like this. Anyways, another form of a sacrifice is an exchange sacrifice, which generally refers to the sacrifice of a rook for a minor piece like a knight or a bishop. In this game, white takes the knight and sacrifices his rook. He goes down on exchange. However, just a move later, he can apply the tactic of a fork to capture the rook and ultimately win the game. Another type of sacrifice is the clearance sacrifice. As the name suggests, it is a sacrifice which clears space. Imagine that you're in the middle of a tough chess match. You notice that you can make a strong capture or check, but unfortunately one of your own pieces is in the way. That's where a clearance sacrifice comes into play. We sacrifice one of our own pieces to clear a square, rank, or diagonal. Here's an example. In this game, white plays rook to f8. The important idea behind this move is to clear this long diagonal by sacrificing the rook. After black captures, white can make use of this diagonal to attack and finish off this game with this forced sequence of moves. Okay, now the next tactic I'll show you is that of exposing hanging pieces. Hanging pieces are undefended pieces. In this game, both knights are hanging. However, white plays a brilliant two-move combination. First, he forces black's bishop to an unprotected square, and finally, after knight c2, both these black pieces are left hanging. Black is unable to defend both in one move, and eventually he will lose material. The next tactic is something you might be knowing but don't necessarily look for. It's trapping a piece. A trapped piece is one that finds itself with either no moves at all or has no safe squares to go. In this game, white realizes that the knight on e5 is potentially trapped if the b6 knight can be eliminated from protecting the c4 square. So first, he takes this knight with his bishop, and after black recaptures, he attacks the e5 knight with f4, and this knight is gone because it has no safe squares to go. Now let's look at some essential checkmate patterns and tactics. Let's start with the support mate. A support mate is a basic checkmate that occurs simply when a queen directly delivers checkmate, receiving support from one other piece. In this game, the white queen checkmates the black king with the support of this knight. Another popular mating pattern is the smothered mate. It is a checkmate by a knight against an enemy king which has no way out because all of its escape squares are blocked by its own pieces. Here's a classical example. White gives a check, king moves. Now it's a double check. If king moves here, then queen f7 is a mate. But if king moves back to the corner, then we have this smothered mate tactic. First queen g8 check, then rook takes on g8 is the only legal move. And finally, knight to f7 is a smaller checkmate as the black king cannot go anywhere since he's trapped by his own pieces. Okay, now another popular mating pattern is the back rank mate. Such a mate happens when either the rook or queen is attacking the enemy king and the enemy king is trapped on the back rank by his own army. Here's an example. First white takes the bishop with his queen, then black recaptures, and finally rook d8 is a checkmate on the back rank since these pawns block him from escaping. Okay, so here's an interesting puzzle for you all. In this position, you need to find the best move continuation for white. Share your answers in the comments and also mention the tactics that can be used. All the best guys, let's see how many of you can solve this. Well, don't forget to like this video and if you haven't yet subscribed, then subscribe now. Thanks for watching and I shall see you in my next video.